Hi, everybody. Today we want to talk about business licenses. And this is something that a lot of people have asked about a specific session on, so I'm glad to do it. Um, I think the way that we'll work to walk through the business licenses is to use a diagram, and I will send a copy of this diagram to everybody. But it tries to explain the process of how business licenses work. So we'll make our way through this diagram, and then we will look at how these steps actually work in mob tax. So the first, if we walk through this diagram, maybe I'll call it a flow chart. It starts up here in the top left, and it starts in this section that says license type. And this is where we have to select the type of license that we are using. In mob tax, you are able to use, you can create as many different types of licenses as you want. Right now, it is set up so that the licenses renew every tax cycle switch. So that means, the expectation is you'll do a tax cycle switch once a year. That means that whatever license type you choose, it would be something that somebody renews once a year. So if there are things like parking spaces or billboard licenses, things like that, if they occur once a year, if it's a payment that's made once a year, then you could theoretically make a license for that and include it in mob tax. Right now, the only type of license that exists in mob tax is business licenses. So we will specifically talk about business licenses, but it's worth mentioning that if there was another type of license where you would renew it on an annual basis, you could theoretically make that in mob tax. So we have to select our type. Let's assume we're going to select a business license. After we select our type, we have to select a category for the license. So some of these categories sound familiar. Consumer discretionary, consumer staples, financial businesses, healthcare businesses. Some councils use non-permanent, or they might call them portfolio businesses. These are the broad categories that you would put business licenses inside of. So after you say that, after you select the type of license, the business license, then you select the categories within business licenses. So these are examples of categories within business licenses. And then you select a subcategory. So below the category, you have a subcategory. Um, at least in Freetown, these used to be called industries. Now the name, usually we call them categories and subcategories. It makes a little bit more sense than calling it an industry. So within each subcategory, then you have, for example, supermarket, restaurant, filling station. These are the specific individual types of businesses. And it doesn't, this is the most specific level you can reach. So you have the broad level of category, and then you have the narrow level of subcategory. And all of the decisions you make about how a business gets charged happen on the subcategory level. Um, the category is mostly just, you can think about it in different ways. I usually think about the category as basically just being a step to help organize um, your subcategories. Because if you only had subcategories, you could very easily end up with hundreds of subcategories all together on the same page, and it would be very difficult to keep track of them and to make sure that your staff are accurately labeling businesses. You might accidentally start having duplicates, so that you might have somebody calls it a gas station, and another person calls it a filling station, and another person calls it a petrol station, and all of a sudden you have three different categories. And because there's so many, you didn't realize they existed. So maybe it just makes sense to have like a category called maybe energy, and then within energy, maybe you have petrol station or filling station. But this makes it simple to keep track of what are the subcategories you have if they are clustered inside of categories. So the category mostly just serves as a way to organize the subcategories. and to keep you from accidentally creating duplicate or redundant names for subcategories. Another way that the category is useful is when you are setting policy with your, the administration or with the political leadership. Um, Sometimes, if you have many different subcategories, then you will start to it will be difficult to set policies for in every individual subcategory. You would have to go through and say, okay, how much are we charging for a barbing shop? How much are we charging for hair salon? How much are we charging um, for cell phone store? How much are we? It would get kind of ridiculous to do that for dozens, if not hundreds, of subcategories. So one way to make those decisions a bit more straightforward is just to say, all of the financial businesses, we're going to charge them rate, rate X. And all of the healthcare businesses, we're going to charge them rate Y. And they're going to have a minimum payment of X, and they're going to have a minimum payment of Y. Um, it makes it easier to make these policy decisions if you make them at the category level. The reality is you have to implement it at the subcategory level. And if you so desire, you could set policies at the subcategory level. It just adds an extra layer of bureaucracy, or it adds a little bit of extra complication to what you have to do in communicating with your colleagues in the administration or in the political leadership. But if they are, if they want to do that level of very nuanced and detailed rate setting at the subcategory level, there's no reason not to. So when you think of categories, it's kind of a way to just think about organization. And then at the subcategory level, this is where all the decisions get made. So what are those decisions? One decision is to decide the subcategory type. Um, and at the subcategory type, um, you can then you can then make further decisions at the subcategory type levels. We'll talk about what the types are in just a moment. Um, but you'll get to choose the subcategory type, and we'll talk about those. You get to set the template for that subcategory. So you can give a different template to a filling station than you give to a barber shop than you give to a supermarket. They can all have their own distinct template. When I say template, this is the PDF that is printed and distributed. So this is the PDF when you generate all your business licenses on an annual basis. The license that is generated comes from the template, and so it comes from this PDF, and you can customize that on the subcategory level. And then you can set the penalty percentage. So if the business owner pays late, you can decide if they will pay a penalty, which would be a percent of their outstanding balance that would get charged to them. And you can set a minimum. So if there is, if a business uh, uh, is not if it's in a property that is not worth very much, and you only take a percent of that property's value, you might end up with a very small business license. And so maybe you want to set a minimum amount. Just as an example, let's pretend that you have a property that's worth 100. Let's say you have a property that's worth 1,000 leons a year, and you have a business license rate of 3%. That means the property would pay 30 leons. Maybe it's not worth it to charge a business 30 leons. So in that case, you could set a minimum of 100 leons, and that way, if you charge 3% of a property worth 1,000 leons, instead of paying 30, it would round up to the minimum amount, 50, 100, let's say 100, right? Um, so yeah, for every subcategory, you can set the minimum, you can set the penalty, you can set the template, and then you can set the subcategory type. What are the subcategory types? Um, there are three. You can have unlinked, linked value-based, and linked area-based. Linked, unlinked means the business is not linked to a property. It is not associated with any property in mob tax. Um, all it is it's a record by itself. It has no association with a property. Um, and so that is unlinked. This might be, portfolio businesses. This might be, stalls, kiosks. Businesses that exist without a property. You wouldn't charge a property tax on a kiosk, so you can't associate that business with a property. As far as linked value based, this means you are linking the business to a property. So the fact that you are linking the business to a property means it's linked. Value based means the tax that's going to be charged on the property is based on the tax that's going to be charged on the business. The tax that's paid as the business license is based on the value of the property. So that's what value based means. Linked area based means that the tax that's charged on the property is based on the area of the business. Um, so uh, these are similar, um, but and they both link the business to a property. The difference is um, this one considers things like the features of the property. It uses the full evaluation model that we use to estimate the property value. This one doesn't use the valuation model, it just uses the area alone. So you can decide which of those options you might prefer. All right. Um, After you select, if you okay, I had to take a quick break. My daughter woke up, but we were just talking about the two different types of logic slots, um, fixed and percentage. Uh, Fixed is a very simple concept to understand. It just means that all licenses where the same that have the same logic slot pay the same fixed amount. So every you could, if you apply a fixed logic slot to a bank, it means that every bank pays the exact same amount of leons. Everything that's has a bank, they pay the same business license amount. If a property is a supermarket, all the supermarkets pay the same amount. That's called fixed. So you can set a fixed logic slot, um, and then we go up. And like we talked about before, if you had an unlinked property, um, unlinked properties always have fixed logic slots because the that if the business license if the business license is not linked to a property, then you have to set a fixed amount for it. So let's think about mobile money kiosks. You can't charge a percent amount of the value of the mobile money kiosk, right? So since you can't charge, that's because there's no property there. So if there's no property, you can't charge a percent of the property value. Instead, you just set a fixed amount. And so you say all the mobile money kiosks have to pay 400 leons. And so that's a fixed amount. And you can connect the unlinked subcategory type with the fixed logic slot. So you have a fixed subcategory, you have a fixed logic slot. And so this is your combination here: fixed subcategory, fixed logic slot. Another subcategory combination would be you could have a subcategory that is value based or area based, and you have a logic slot that's fixed, and this is the combination you have. So either value or area based, uh, and you just choose that, but you choose that simply because you want to link the business to a property. So you're choosing one of these linked options, but then ultimately you're using a fixed logic slot. So this means the user sets the range of values or areas for the logic slot. We'll talk about that in a moment. Um, but the logic slot is chosen. You're setting a fixed amount. You're setting a fixed amount. So an example of this might be a bank. So let's say you have a business license for a bank, you want to associate that business license with the property that is the bank. So you're going to choose one of these, linked value based or linked area based. You're going to choose one of these because you want to link the business with a property. So you have to use a linked uh, subcategory type. So you choose one of these, doesn't really matter which one, and you link the business to a property. Then, but what you want to do is you want to charge the same fixed amount for all the business licenses in that subcategory. In which case, you choose a fixed logic slot, and you will set the amount that you want to set. Maybe it's 10,000 leons if it's a bank, something very high. Um, so that's fixed. Fixed just means you set a specific amount. It's not based on a percentage. It's based on a fixed amount for that business. The other option is percentage. So all of the licenses that fall into a percentage license slot pay a percent of the value of the portion of the property used by a business. So um, this is what currently happens for most properties in most of the council's databases. Is they they charge a percent of the property value as a business tax. So um, for to use the percentage logic slot, you have to link the business to a property, and then after you link the business to a property, you you then decide uh, you then decide what percent of that property value, or at least the part of the property that is used for the business, what percent of that that value gets charged as the tax. Um, so this would be a combination where you would have a value or area based subcategory type, and then if you use, actually this should say percentage, not progressive. If you have a percentage logic slot, um, then then you are able to charge the percent value of the business as the tax. Um, you will have a range start and end. So this is either the start and end of how of either if either the value or the area. So if you choose value base, this is the start and end point of the value of the property to which that logic slot applies. If you choose area based, then it's the start and end range of the area to which that logic slot applies. So, for example, what this allows you to do is if you want to charge a certain fixed amount for properties that are from 0 to 500 square feet, and then another fixed amount for properties that are 500 to 1,000 square feet, etc., then you can create multiple logic slots, and within each logic slot you say from 0 to 500 I want to charge 40 leons. From 500 to 1,000 I want to charge 80 leons, etc. So you can have multiple logic slots and then a start and end value for each logic slot. Similarly, you can have start and ends for the value of the property. So if you want to say a property that's worth 0 to 10,000 leons, then I'm going to charge a certain tax rate. And then for a property that's worth 10,000 to 100,000, I'm going to charge another tax rate. And 100,000 and up, I charge a third tax rate. So you can charge either specific fixed amounts or specific percentage amounts based on the start and end values of the logic slot. Um, then if it's a fixed logic slot, you enter the fixed amount of the tax. If it's a percent logic slot, you enter the percent of the property value, and then the result is you get the tax. So when you zoom out, it's a big flow chart, but when you zoom out, you'll start to understand it. So what I want to do from this point is try to see if we can walk through an example. Um, uh, let's let's do an example um, of a. I'm using the staging server. Um, let's do. Let me see. I have some examples. We're going to do a mobile money agent in a kiosk. Okay. Mobile money agent in a kiosk. Okay, so the first thing we have to choose is the license type. Let's do this in MobTax. All right, so we have license types here, but that's only if we want to create new types. Um, for our purpose, um, we are going to use a business license because that's the only type that currently exists in all the councils. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go back and forth between the admin panel and the licenses module. So I'm in the licenses module, and I'm going to do create license. And I'm going to choose the license type, and it's going to be a business license type. And I'll hit create license. Okay. So that's step one, choosing the license type. Step two is choosing the category. Um, for this case, it's a non-permanent license. So here in category, we will choose non-permanent. It's the only option that appears. Quickly, why is it the only option that appears? It's because it's not linked to a property. If I was to link this to a property, like that, so I just clicked related entity. This is how you link. You do related entity. I select property, and then I put in the property ID. Now my property is linked to the business. And you see when I do that, it opens up all the other categories. It's because the other categories are linked. They're all linked um, subcategories. And so these categories appear because their subcategories have either linked value-based or linked area-based licenses. If I want to use unlinked licenses, then I need to make sure I disassociate the business from the property. In this case, I would remove, let's see, I don't know if I can do this or not. Um, there we go. Okay, so I remove the business from the property. There's no business linked to the property. Instead, I can choose non-permanent, right? And then within non-permanent, I choose the appropriate subcategory. I have different sizes of consumer discretionary, different sizes of consumer staples. But what I want is a mobile money. It doesn't exist here, so I'll have to make it. All right, so I'll go to the admin panel and I will go to license categories. These are my existing categories. If I want to create a new category, I could create a new category. Let's do it just as an example, just so that you see the workflow. I'll create one and I will call it kiosks. Okay, and it's a business license, so I will submit that. Okay, and then within kiosks, I'm going to create one called, I'm going to create a new subcategory, and I'm going to call it mobile money agent. Okay, or maybe I'll call it mobile money kiosk. Okay, within the subcategory type, um, I need to change this real fast. Okay, there's a small issue with the labeling in here. It's not a big deal. We just have to ask Bluesoft to update the labels here. But basically, what we are calling unlinked, they are calling fixed right now, but we'll have that changed. Um, just when I click fixed, imagine I'm clicking something that says unlinked. So I'm choosing an unlinked subcategory type. And if we go back to our diagram, means that we have got to this point. So we have chosen our license type, we've chosen our category, which is a new category we're calling kiosk. We're creating a subcategory type called mobile money kiosk, or we're creating a subcategory called mobile money kiosk. For our subcategory type, we're choosing unlinked. And unlinked is, it's what they're calling fixed here, but it's unlinked. Then we have to select our template. This is the template these are the templates that are available. we have a template called NP. NP stands for non-permanent. So we'll use the business license for non-permanent structures. You can create as many templates as you want and use them, no problem. If I want to assign a penalty for late payment, I could do that here. I won't do it now. I could set a minimum tax if I wanted to. I won't worry about it right now, but if I wanted to set a minimum, I could do that. Okay, so at this point, I have, if we go to our diagram, I have selected my subcategory type. I selected unlinked. I selected my template. I selected my penalty amount. I put it at 0. I selected my minimum. I put it at 0. And now I have to go down and work on my logic slots. Okay. So what we talked about before is if I have an unlinked property type or subcategory, I'm sorry, if I have an unlinked subcategory type, then the only option is fixed. So if I look at my options here, I need to add a logic slot, and I will use an option. I will call it, let's call it small kiosk. All right. And then from my options, the only option is a fixed amount. I don't have an option for value based, or I don't have an option for percentage, only fixed. And for small kiosks, I'm going to charge 100 leons. Now, let's go to our diagram. At this point, we follow the arrow from the fixed logic slot. We see that we have a fixed subcategory, a fixed logic slot, and we enter the value in the logic, or we enter an amount for the value in the logic slot. So here we see value, we enter the value in leons, and right, and then we get our result. If there's more than one logic slot, it will be manually selected when we are choosing the property type. Or I'm sorry, when we're choosing the license subcategory. I'll explain that in a moment. Let's create several logic slots. We'll have a small kiosk, a medium kiosk, and a large kiosk. Okay, and we'll select fixed for each of these calculations. Medium will be 200 leons and large be 400 leons. Okay, all right, so I will submit this. Okay, so I've created the business license category. Now if I go back to the licenses module, let's reload this. When I select, let's go back to licenses and let's do it all from the beginning. Create a business license. Okay. Okay, so I now have a new option that was created for a category called kiosks. There's a subcategory called mobile money kiosk. And you can see now I can choose from the small, medium, and large kiosk. So this one was 100, 200, and 400. Let's choose 400. Let's give it a name, Evan Mobile Money Test. This is an optional field for type of business. If you can basically almost use this as a comment box if you want to explain more about the business. You can say Orange Money Affiliate. It's not required that you do this, but you can put it in there if you want. If you have a tax identification number, let's say, well, we don't have that in the system now, but if you wanted to, you could, I'll show quickly how to do that. You would go to your admin panel and you would select, let's see, hold on one second. Registrations. It would be registrations, create a registrar, and we'll say NRA. Okay, so we create an NRA, and I think I might have to reload the page. Let's reload this page. Okay, so now NRA appears. So let's see. Let's do this again. Create a kiosk, mobile money kiosk, Evan kiosk, mobile money test. Type of business, orange money kiosk. Uh, add a tax identification number and say that that's an NRA number, for example. I need to put a location for the business. I'll put it right here in a here's the clock tower. I'll put my kiosk at the clock tower. Um, I need for delivery and discovery, I need to detect what delivery layer I'm in. So I need to hit detect or detect all if you have multiple. So it detects that I'm in zone 139. That's good. I need to make sure this is filled out. Um, I won't have a, otherwise I won't receive my tax bill because I won't be assigned to a delivery zone. So you need to make sure that when you create a business that it's assigned to a delivery zone. If there's a contact, that exists, or even if there's not a contact that exists, so there's no Evan in the database, I can create an Evan. Mr. Go away. That's from this visit. This is something in my computer. Don't worry about that. Evan Trowbridge. I don't need to, if I wanted to, I could put my email and phone number. I won't do that right now. If I had a tax ID, I could put that. If I wanted to put a comment, I could put that. It's all possible. So I'll save that. We need to choose if it's small, medium, or large. Large, let's say. Okay, so I've entered all the information for my business. If I had documents, I could upload them. If I had photos, I could upload the photos here. If it's a non-permanent structure, like a kiosk in my case, I would upload the photo here. Um, and if it was otherwise, if I was connected if I linked my business to a property, um, I won't bother to upload one right now. If I linked my business to a property, it would automatically inherit the image of the property here. Um, if I have a non-permanent structure, so it's not associated with a property, it's not linked, or I'm sorry, yeah. If I have a business that's not linked to a property, then this won't populate, and so I need to add my own image here. If I go to payments, I should see 400. Yep, that's because it's a large kiosk, so it calculated that my value is 400. So everything worked fine. At this point, we've made it through the flow chart, and the result is the tax license calculated. So this is, we started from the license type, went to the category, subcategory type. We selected unlinked. We chose our template. We chose our penalty percentage. We chose our minimum. We chose our logic slot. We made 3 fixed logic slots, and then we put the value we put the value of each of the logic slots, and then we got our result. So this is pretty straightforward. This is how it works for a non-permanent business. Let's switch gears and try out a permanent business. So let's say, give me a second. Um, let's say a bank. So let's say a bank with a fixed amount. So it's a bank, but we're going to use a fixed logic slot. So let me close these other ones. Okay. Don't need this anymore. And what we'll do is we'll have a bank with a fixed amount, and let's see. So we start off with the license type business license, and then we go to license category, and let's call it financial services. So let's go back to our staging server, and I'm going to go ahead and I don't know if I can delete this or not. I will. We don't because I'm on staging. I don't need to be as careful as I would normally be. So I will go ahead and find the business I just created, and I'm gonna go ahead and archive it since we don't need it anymore. Okay, and so now the business is in the archive, and I don't think I can at this point because I don't think I can delete the categories at this point. see, probably it will not let me. Yeah. Once you create a category and assign it to a business, you can't really delete it because um, at that point the business, um, if you were to delete it, it would cause an error, because if I deleted the mobile money kiosk, then what would my business be assigned to? It'd be assigned to nothing. Um, and so if that's the case, yeah, you kind of have to just leave the license. You have to just leave the category in there. Um, yeah, it won't let you do that. Okay, but let's say, okay, we're working on a bank, so we have financial services. That'll be our category. And then within financial services, we have bank here. Okay. Um, so great. We have everything we need. Um, and then we're going to go to our subcategory type. And we want to use a linked value-based subcategory. And that's because we want to link the business to a property. We don't want the businesses to exist without a connection to a property. So I'll go here and I'll make sure the settings are correct. Linked value-based, perfect. That's what we wanted. That's great. And then we get a new option here, and it's saying what kind of property are you going to link this business to? And we're going to, it's first of all, it's going to ask us for our evaluation form. You just choose the most recent one. And it's going to say which property type do you want to link this business to? And we're going to link the business to commercial properties by default. And it's going to say, what template do you want to use for the business license? We have several options here. Let's use the current business license with the new CA. And then it's going to say, do you want to give a penalty? No, no penalty. Is there a minimum tax? Let's change this to 0, and I'll explain why in a moment. We'll change that to 0. And then we have our logic slot already exists here. But what we want to use, well, let's just walk through the example here. So we worked on the template, we worked on the penalty percentage, we worked on the minimum. We chose a linked value-based. So we're going to link the property to the business to a property. And now let's, we have to choose the property type. So we did that. Now let's go down and talk about logic slots. What we want is we want all the banks to pay the same business license amount. And so what we're going to do is choose fixed. And so we choose fixed. And right now, this is not a fixed business. It's not a fixed logic slot. We're going to change it from percentage to fixed. All right. And now this is something we didn't have before. We have range start and range end. And we talked about this before. What this means is this is the start to the end of the business value. So, or the property value rather. So if the property is valued at 0 to 1,000, and let's say we want to charge 10,000 leones to the banks. So from businesses that are worth 0, I guess this doesn't make sense. We'll say from 0 to 1,000,000. So businesses that are worth between 0 and 1,000,000, they pay 10,000 leones. And businesses that are in a let's call it bank small and bank large. And we'll choose fixed again, and we'll say businesses that are worth between 1 million. And if I leave this at 0, it means infinity. So if I leave range end at 0, it's. Hi, sorry, my computer had an error, and it stopped recording the video. So we're going to pick up where we left off. We were configuring the logic slots, and we had set this up so there was 2 logic slots, a small bank that will apply to businesses and properties from a range of 0 to 1 million in value. And for properties that fall into this logic slot, or businesses that fall into this logic slot, then they would get charged a business license of 10,000. And then there's a second logic slot, and this would catch any business in a property with a value from 1 million to infinity. Okay. And for properties that fall into that logic slot, they would get charged a business license of 20,000. So that's the way the two logic slots work. So now that we've established those logic slots, let's test it out. So using the staging server, we'll create a new business, select business license as the type, and then we can't select bank yet because we haven't linked the property to or we haven't linked the business to a property. So in order to use a business license category or subcategory that is linked, we need to first link the business to a property, and then we'll be able to choose from the subcategories that have a linked type. Also, we need to submit this so that it's saved. Okay, so let's just pick a property. So this is a property. We need to tell it the number of floors that are being used in the property. Let's take a look at this property quickly. So it's KCC property 3, because we want to know how many actual commercial floors there are in the property. Because if we look at the property, this one is mixed use. It's part domestic and part commercial. So if I look at, here's the property, KCC 3, and I look at the features, I see that it's one floor, and 1/4 of the floor is for commercial, and 3/4 of the floor are domestic. So 0.75 floors, so 3/4, 0.75 is the same as 3/4. Those are 3/4 of the single floor is domestic, 1/4 of the single floor is commercial. So I will say that my bank is occupying that 0.25 floors. There we go. And because I have linked the business to a property, I can now choose from linked categories. So I will go to financial services, and then I have a linked subcategory, which is bank. Choose bank. And let's see. We'll use a contact. If you can search for a contact here. I am already here as a contact. If I wasn't here, you could use create new and enter a new contact information, but that's not necessary because I already exist in the database. So we'll use my contact information, and then we will save this. Did it work? We need to give a name to the business. Evans Second Test a Bank. Okay. So now we've saved it, and if we want to look at the payments, we would see how much we're owed. Let's try to figure it out first before we verify it. Let's figure it out first. So here we have that the assessed annual value of the property is 1,875. 1,875. So 1,875 is much less than a million. And so since it's less than a million, it won't be in this logic slot. Instead, it will be in this logic slot. And if it falls into this logic slot, then we should automatically see a business license of 10,000, just a flat 10,000 business license from this logic slot. Let's see what it says when we go to payments. There it is, 10,000, right? So it worked fine. And you can see that this is a relatively straightforward way of charging flat amounts to properties. Right now we're using value-based. Later I'll talk about using area-based, but just to quickly introduce the concept, basically I could also set this up so that it charges a flat rate based on an area. So if we say, the area of this business is 300 square feet, and if we said from 0 to 500, you would charge this amount, and then from 500 to infinity, you would charge that amount, this amount. You can, then this specific business at 307 square feet would fall into the first logic slot, and that's because I'm using area-based and not value-based. But let's go back to using value-based. Let's just cancel out of here so we don't save anything. Quickly, let's go back to our business. Let's generate the RDN. Okay, so here we've generated it. We see that the subcategory is, or we see that the main category is financial services, the subcategory is bank, and that's all correct. I think the image is offline right now due to some maintenance happening in MobTax on the staging server. So normally the image would appear here. And then we'll go to gallery. Yeah, that's fine. Obviously not a bank, but this is just a practice. So I think everything looks fine. So now we're going to move on to another type, but hopefully, or another example. Just actually, let's quickly look at our flowchart to remind ourselves what we did. So we chose a business license. We chose financial services as the category. We chose bank as the subcategory. Then we chose a subcategory type. We chose a template for that we were going to use. We chose a penalty percentage. We chose a minimum. For our subcategory type, we chose to make it linked value based. So if we go back to here, linked value based, and then we chose the evaluation form and the property type, the default property type. What that is doing by choosing the default property type is it's saying, first we have to, the way you get the property type is it takes that from the property types that are available in the evaluation form. If you want to learn more about the evaluation form, watch the videos I recorded on valuation. But in the 2026 valuation form, these are the property types, and we're going to say by default commercial. And what that means is if when I was setting up this business license, if I didn't select something here, it should automatically default to commercial. It should default to associating with the commercial. But I can always override it here. I can always override the portion of the property that's associated with the business license. What this is mostly to handle issues where you are linking the business to a property and the property has multiple uses. So it might be part domestic, part commercial. And this says if you have a property with multiple uses, which is the default portion of the property that the business should be associated with. And it should, in all cases that I can think of, it should be commercial, right? Then so that was that was choosing the evaluation form and the property type. Then we moved on to the logic slot. We chose fixed logic slots. Later, we'll talk about percentage logic slots, but we chose a fixed logic slot. We combined so then we got our combination of a value-based linked subcategory and a fixed logic slot. What that means, the user sets the range of the values for each logic slot, and the logic slot is automatically chosen based on the value. So that's what we did. And then we set the range starts and ends. So we had two logic slots. We set one from 0 to 1,000,000 and the other one from 1,000,000 to infinity. And then we made the value in those logic slots 10,000 for the first logic slot and 20,000 for the second logic slot. A quick note here, we have here it says the word value appears here, and it's a little bit confusing. We might consider changing this to a more useful term. The word value here has nothing to do with the word value here. So when it says linked value based here, this means based on the value of the property. So if we look at this property has an assessed annual value of 1,875, and so it's linking the business to the property and using the logic slot ranges. The start and end of the logic slot range are referring to this assessed annual value of the property. This, and maybe what we'll do is we'll change this to a more useful term. I think you can see how I'm using the translate button. Maybe we can call this license value. We'll think about a term, and I think I'll talk about this later in the video also. We might think about a better term here because it's a little bit confusing to have value here and value here when they don't mean the same thing. This is the value of the business license. So I'm either going to enter a fixed amount if I'm using a fixed, or if I use a percentage, which I'll talk about later, I'll enter a percentage amount here. This doesn't have to do with the value of the property. The value of this value relates to the value of the property. Um, and these values here relate to the value of the property. This value is talking about the business license amount or the business license value. So hopefully that we might update the terminology to make that more clear, but at least you're familiar with this section of the mobtext configuration. Okay, we'll move on to another example in just a second, but thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to try to do a business license or a business license for an electronics shop. So our example is an electronics shop with a license based on property value. So we start off with choosing the license type, choose a business license, same as the last examples. We have a category, the broad category that this will fall into. We could do this different ways, but let's say it's consumer discretionary. And then we have a subcategory, and we'll call it electronics shop. So let's do that in mobtext. Let's go ahead and we don't need these right now. Don't need this. Okay, so let's go to our categories. Inside of categories, we have consumer discretionary. Let's see, is there an electronics shop? We have an electronical appliance shop, so we'll use that. Okay, electronical appliance shop. This will be our subcategory that we use. We are going to use next we have to look at the subcategory type. But before we get to that, let's look at our template, our penalty percentage, and our minimum. So going to mobtext, the template we'll use, we can choose from these different templates. There's different ways to do this. Some councils might want to create a new template every year. Other councils might choose to always have a current template and they just keep updating it as they make changes. There's no really right or wrong way to do it. The only thing that I would say is as you update the template, it's a good idea to save the previous versions you have just as an archive. So if we arrive at next year, what I might do then, or let's say we arrive at the year 2028. In that case, I would maybe save one of these as 2027 BL, and then for the year 2028, I would use the current a new current version. The reason I would do that is it's good to have an archive of all the previous templates you've used, so you can refer back to them. So when you update the current template, use your old template and save it with the year that you used it. So that's a little bit of a sidetrack, but an explanation of why you would have multiple templates in your database. But here we have the business license 24, 25, 26, and then current. Let's say that this is going to be, there's an option for non-permanent, and then there's the normal option. You can create multiple templates. You could have 10 templates. There's no reason not to, aside from the fact that it gets complicated to update them all. But let's go ahead and say business license new, and we will have a penalty percentage set to 0, and let's set the minimum tax to, let's leave it at 300. And the reason that the minimum tax, sorry, I got cut off there, but the reason the minimum tax matters is that we're going to use a percentage logic slot. So not a fixed logic slot like we've used previously. We're going to use percentages. And what this is going to do is this is going to, similar to before where we had a start and an end range. So in this case, we're going from 0 to infinity, because if you remember, if the end range is 0, that means infinity. So if this is applying to every property, because 0 to infinity captures every property. But if their value falls within this range, then this is the logic slot that applies. And since it's a percentage logic slot, what happens is the property gets charged 2.5% of the value of the portion used by the business. Let me clarify. The business, like if you have a property and one floor is used for a business, then it calculates the value of that one floor, and then it uses 2.5% of that value to charge the business. So let's say you have a property with 2 floors, and one floor is used for one business. Then what it does is it takes the value of that single floor, and then it takes and charges 2.5% of that value, and that's how you get the business license amount. So um, so here, and similar to before, we could apply multiple logic slots. Let's, just for the sake of experiment, let's do it. So let's have a small electronic appliance shop and a large electrical appliance shop. Okay, we will make the percentage this, and we can say, let's have from properties that are valued at 0 to 1,000, charge 2.5%, and from 1,000 to infinity, we'll charge 5%. So the higher value businesses get charged a higher value or a higher rate. That's something we can do. And we'll submit that. And let's create a light. Let's go ahead and create a business license and test it out. Um, let's first look at our graphic. So if we refer back to the graphic, we used as we remember, we used a linked business subcategory type. And then if we go down to the logic slot options, actually we did not use, it says fixed, but we actually use percentage. So this is not correct. Excuse me one second. I've fixed the diagram. So we are using a percentage logic slot. So previously we had used fixed logic slots. This time we're choosing a percentage logic slot. So all the licenses in the logic slot pay the same percent of the value of the portion of the property used by the business. We follow that logic slot and we get this combination here. It's a combination of either a value or an area-based linked subcategory type, and then a percentage logic slot. And we can set the values, we can set the range of the values or areas of the logic slot. And we can choose, and then what that means is, for example, oh, did we lose it? Let's see. That was electronic appliances shop. What that means is we get to set the value here, which is the value is the amount that is taxed. So 2.5% is taxed here, 5% is taxed here. And then we set the start and end range for that logic slot, and that gives us the value and then the result of the it gives us the value is this right here. This is the value that will be charged. It's either a percent or a flat amount, and then the result is the tax that's owed. And I think, yeah, let's look at doing this with an example property like we talked about before. So we'll create a business license and let us choose a first thing. Since this is a linked business license, we have to choose a property to link it to. So let's I don't know which one. Let's just try number 3. This has a commercial portion, so that's great. So we will select commercial. We have to tell it how many floors. Let's choose. Let's say this building is 3 floors. I don't know how many floors it has, but let's say it's 3 floors. We're going to choose that, and then we will choose our category. So it was consumer discretionary. It was electrical appliance shop, and we will call it Evan Test Business Electrical Appliance Shop. Okay, and we can leave the rest of this empty. We'll link it to my name. Okay, all good. And let's go ahead and save it. Okay, we'll go through. Um, okay, maybe this property doesn't have an image. Could be. Let's see. Sometimes the properties in the first like 10 digits, they were, yeah. Okay, so this property doesn't have an image. Let's link it to another property. Um, let's see. Let's try to pick one. Might be commercial. Okay. So, apologies for the interruption, but I think I realized what happened is that it's late at night here, and I think the MobTax image server was turned off for the night, so that's why the images aren't appearing. So it's just because of the nighttime timeout. But let's look quickly at what's happened here. Okay, so we have this property, um, and if I go to the features, I see that the property itself is it has an assessed annual value of 1,875. And what I did is I originally had put in 3 stories, or 3 floors, but I changed that to 0.25 because when I looked at the property, I see that it's actually a 1 floor structure, and 3/4 of the floor, or 0.75, are taken up by a domestic portion, and the commercial portion of the structure is only 0.25, or 1/4 of the floor. So um, what that means is you have the total roof outline, and then you take 1/4 of the total roof outline. That gives us the area of the building that's being used for commercial purposes, 307 square feet. So 1,231 square feet times 0.25 results in 307. Um, and if you run this, then if you run that through the formula, like we talked about in the valuation session, then you get an assessed annual value of 1,875. Now, what we would expect is since 1,875 is higher than 1,000, we would expect this property to fall into the large uh, logic slot up here, okay? Because this is properties worth 1,000 or more. So it should apply the value of 5% to the property value to get the business license amount, and not 2.5. So if we look here, we can calculate this ourselves. It's this amount, 1,875, and we'll multiply that by 0.05, which is another way of saying 5%. And what we should see is a value of 93.77. So if we go here and we go to the payments, which is where we see what they owe, aha, it says 300. What's going on is because 93.77 is below our minimum tax amount, it's rounding up to the minimum tax. Why don't we set this to 0, do submit, and let's go here to recalculate the amount. One way to do it is to assign it to one subcategory and then back. So now let's go back to payments and see 93.77. So it was 93.77, 93.77. So our calculation is correct. That gets rounded down to 93. So let's see if we can get it to fit into another logic slot. So let's say we change our policy so that this is from 0 to 5,000, and this is 5,000 to infinity. What this means is that this property of 1,875 will actually fall into the small logic slot, which is 2.5%. So let's do the same thing. Do that times 0.025. Okay, so we would expect the tax to be 46.88. Let's go here, reset. Save. And oops. Okay. 46.88. So that matches our calculation. So it's working. It's working fine. Let me see what happens if we try to generate a. Let's see if this works. Okay. All right. So because this is offline, we're not getting the image, but we're getting the information. We have the business category, like we talked about. We have the subcategory here. So you see how those also show up on the business license RDN or business tax bill, business license tax bill. So a few other things that are maybe worth talking about. We've been using the linked value based. There's also linked area based. And what that does is, like we were saying before, we have these ranges from 0 to 5,000, 5,000 to infinity. But these ranges right now are based on the value of the portion of the property that are used for the business. What we could do instead is make these represent the actual area of the business. And to do that, we would say link it to a property, but um, make it linked to the property. So link it to the property, but have the range start and end represent area. So in this case, this business is 307 square feet. So let's go ahead and have from 0 to 200 be small, and uh, let's have a medium category, medium, and let's have from uh, uh, let's actually use fixed. Let's use fixed for just for fun. So from 0 to 200 is small, and they will get charged 50 leons, and from 200 to 500 is medium, and it'll get charged 100 leons, and from 500 to infinity is large, and they will get charged 200 leons. So we would expect, with a property of 307 feet, we would expect that to fall into the medium logic slot, and we would expect them to pay 100 leons. Let's see what happens to apply it. We'll switch the subcategory, and then we'll switch it back. And we see that it has become 100 leons. So it's fitting correctly into the subcategory based on the area. So that's great. One thing you might be wondering, you can see how there's a lot of flexibility here. You could even mix this up. So you could say, let's say you have a lot of very low value property businesses, small electrical businesses, and let's go back to value based. Um, let's say that they are worth uh, let's say that they're worth 0 to 1,000 leons, that they have a value of 0 to 1,000 leons. It doesn't really make sense to charge a percentage to those, but so maybe you just set a fixed amount from 0 to 1,000, and you say those ones they will pay 40 leons a year. So you use a fixed for the lowest, and then you say for the ones between 1,000 and 100,000, they will get charged a percentage. So we'll charge them a 5% rate, right? And then yeah, you can charge them a 5% rate. And then for anything above, let's see, 5% of 100,000 would be 5,000. So let's say that anything above 100,000 just gets charged a flat 5,000. So 100,000 to infinity gets charged a flat 5,000. So from 0 to 1,000, they get charged a flat 40. From 1,000 to 100,000, they get charged 5%. And then from 1,000 and up, they go back to a flat 5,000. So you can imagine a scenario like this also making a lot of sense if you wanted to do that. Right now, none of the councils use logic slots a lot. Most of the councils just have a single logic slot that they use like this. So they just have a single logic slot. It's usually value based, and they will charge uh, maybe they will charge like 5% value on everything, and they will have it running from 0 to infinity. Um, yeah, I think if you could consider using the alternative ones, and I think it would work very well. But what I mean by alternative ones is I mean using multiple logic slots, and it opens up a lot more possibilities. So if we go, I appreciate all of your patience sitting through this. If you go back to this diagram, I think it will make sense now. If we think about all the let's just let's have it open here and see if we have this open here and see if we can go through it all one by one. So we talked about the license type. This is, like we said, if we create a license, if we create a license, it asks us for the license type. Right now, there's only business licenses, but in the theory, in the future, if you wanted to, you could create billboard licenses, parking spot licenses, anything that is renewed annually. Then you can create license categories. In our case, if you have admin panel access, you see the license categories, and these are the categories. These are helpful for organizing the subcategories. And then within each category, you have the related subcategories. For each subcategory, you can specify the subcategory type. So linked, either unlinked, where the business is not linked to a property, or linked value based or linked area based, where it is linked to a property. And the distinction is whether you're going to charge the tax, or whether the logic slot will be in relation to the value, or whether the logic slot will be in relation to the area. If you only have one logic slot, it doesn't matter. So if there's only one logic slot, you might as well just use value based, right? If you only have one logic slot, just maybe it's easiest just to use value based. But the idea is like everything is going to fit into the same logic slot if it goes from 0 to infinity. So it doesn't really matter that much which you choose, as long as you choose a linked type. So you have the subcategory type, which is either unlinked, linked value-based, or linked area-based. You have the template that you choose to produce the RDN, or the business license, whatever you want to call it. So like if we look at the business I just created, right, this RDN that we created is based off of the template that I chose here. As a quick reminder, hopefully we'll record another video about templates, but when you create a template, you specify the type of the template. Any template that you list as a business license template will become available for you to choose. So if you see we have BL 2024, BL 2025, or 2025 BL new CA, 2026 BL not NP, non-permanent new CA. So these are business license templates, and these are what I end up being able to choose from here. Okay. I set the penalty percentage, which in this case I'm setting it to 0. If I wanted to set a penalty percentage for people who pay late, I could do that there. I set the minimum, and then I start thinking about the logic slots. So I go down here and I choose either I'm going to make the logic slot fixed, or I'm going to make it's either fixed or percentage, right? If it's fixed, then I specify the exact amount everybody's going to pay. If it's percentage, then I specify the percent of the value of the property. So, again, if I had like this property, the commercial portion is worth 1,875. So if I said 5% of that, 0.05, right? They pay 94 leons. Um, so that percent of the property value would be established here as what the business pays. Um, and so, yeah. Um, so if you choose fixed, then you can end up with a combination of an unlinked subcategory type and a fixed logic slot. And this leads to the fixed amount of the license being or the value being the fixed amount of the license. If you have more than one logic slot, the logic slot will be determined. The logic slot will be determined. That's applied will be determined based on which of these it falls into, which of these the value falls into. And when I say value, it's important to understand. I don't mean this value. I mean the value of the property. So the assessed annual value, the AAV. That's what I'm referring to. This value means the value of the tax of the business license. So a little bit confusing because we have the word value multiple times. This value base does not mean this here. In fact, maybe we should we might reconsider naming that. For people who have access to the translation functions, if you want, you could consider coming up with a better term than value and setting that there. But let's not, for now, let's not do that. We'll cancel that and turn this off. Okay. If we used a fixed logic slot and then paired that with an area-based or a value-based linked subcategory type, then we would get to set the ranges. So here we have linked, and we'll use a fixed. So that's what we already have set up right now. And so we then would set the start and end range for the logic slots, and we would then set the rate, or I'm sorry, we would set the total amount that would be paid in the fixed for the fixed amount, not the percent, but total leons that get paid. And these don't, these are like if the value is between 0 and 10, which is kind of a silly amount, you would pay 200 leons. And if it's between 10 and infinity, you would pay 400 leons. So we've talked about this quite a few times, but I want to make sure it's clear. The other option would be to use, instead of a fixed amount, to use a percentage, in which case we would switch this to percentage, right? And let's say from 0 to 100, you would pay 2%, and from 100 to infinity, you would pay 3%, right? And so you pay the percent of the property value. The range start and end determine which logic slot you fall into. The ranges either refer to a value of the property or the area of the business, and that helps us get to the result. I think hopefully if you give this some thought, it will make sense. I think this is used. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to reach out to me and let me know. Hopefully this makes sense. There's some other things about business license. I think the most important thing with the business license is to understand these concepts. But I think it's not so complicated, to be honest. One thing we showed earlier is if you need to remove a business license, you can hit archive. Once you hit archive, you cannot bring it back, so it goes away. And so you cannot bring it back. A difference between MobTax 1.0 and 2.0, which I believe most people have realized by now, is that the businesses have their payments kept in a separate part of the page. than the properties. So that's different than 1.0. If we look at some of the older businesses, let's see. Oh, I'm in properties. I want to be in businesses. Let's see if this. Okay, I wanted to see if I could find one with payments from more than a year ago, but don't think we're going to find that. Um, no. Okay. So if you hit current only, you will see only the records for this year. If you hit all records, you will see the records for previous years, which can be useful, right? Um, in the licenses menu, if you need to search for this is very nice because you can see the property that's associated with the business. Um, so yeah, here's the property. No photo gallery, unfortunately. But you can see associated licenses when you're in the property. You can see associated licenses. I click show, and here is the license that's associated with this property, and that way I can easily jump to the license. Very nice. So I can see this Sierra Leone Drivers Union is connected to this property. So I'm able to jump back and forth between the property and the license. I also am able to see if I go to the licenses menu, I see the corresponding property that's linked to the license if one is linked. Properties that are not associated or businesses that are not associated with the property obviously don't have a property there. And so these would be the non-permanent businesses, which instead of being linked to a property are linked to a location or a point on the map. So if you have any questions, I hope you reach out to me. I will put the links to these graphics, these charts that I've shared. I'll share the links in the description of this video. And if you have any further questions about this, I hope you reach out to me and let me know. I think one last thing. Be thoughtful about how many categories you create, how many subcategories you create specifically. Because if the council decides, for example, to change the rate for all consumer discretionary subcategories, you now have to go through each of these individual subcategories and one by one update them all. It's not so bad. You can do it. You just have to be careful. You have to be thorough that you do it properly. So it means you don't, maybe the council says all consumer discretionary get charged 4% of the property value. Okay, that's easy to write down on a piece of paper, but it means that you need to go in here and go to here, update this to 4%, right? And then submit that, and then go to the next one, update the next one to 4%, submit that, hit submit, right? And you have to go through this. You can see it's not so bad. You can do it, but it's kind of annoying. And there's easy opportunities to make an error. So what I would say is in the long term, try to find ways to condense the subcategories rather than creating lots and lots of options for the subcategories. Think about ways to maybe condense them. So here in Kenema, for example, they have diamond agent, diamond dealer, diamond exporter. If that's really important to distinguish, that's fine. But what I would say is perhaps you want to consolidate these into just diamond business. Hey everybody, a quick extra addition to the video. A quick extra addition to the video. Earlier, I talked about how it was a bit confusing how this field here was called value because we also talk about the value of the property. And so what I did is I updated the translation. I used the translate feature to update this label. Now I call it license tax. So this is either the flat amount if you're using fixed, or it's the percent amount if you're using percentage. So if you were using percentage, you would charge maybe 2% or 5%, something like that. If you were charging a flat fixed rate, if you're choosing a fixed rate, you would set, what you would choose, maybe 10,000 leons if it's a high value business. Um, so now this field is called license tax. It used to be called value, but I found that confusing because we were also talking about the idea of the property's value. So we were talking about property values and we were talking about license values, and it was a little bit difficult to distinguish those. So I changed the terminology. In case you're wondering how to do that, if you have the proper permissions, you'll have the translate button up here. That allows you to turn this on. Actually, let's only have one of these. Okay, I'll turn on the translate button. I go up here and I can translate this field to be called value, and I will hit enter and then I will hit update. Right, so now it says value, and then I turn it off and now it says value, and that translation is saved. But I think, yeah, that's yeah, that's how you do it. I'll change it to license tax. Hit update and save it by toggling this back off. Just to quickly say that I also updated the diagram. So in the diagram, this section of the diagram, towards the end of the flow, used to say value and it says license tax now. And that's just to match the terminology that I put in mob tax just a few minutes ago. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to me or to attend the upcoming office hour. And I hope this is useful and I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you very much.